We have a massive Habs free agency update. This one coming from Frank Seravalli, as reports have surfaced that Jonathan Marchessault could very well be on his way out from Nashville, even with some salary retention, and he names Montreal as one of the favorable landing spots for the former 40-goal winger. We have to dive into Jonathan Marchessault, how Montreal tried to get him last year, and the huge benefit this would be to Montreal going forward, and Frank's report. But that's not the only thing. The Athletic has done a recent mock draft, and they have Montreal picking a 40-goal scorer at forward and the number 16 pick as well. We have to dive into Carter Bear, what he brings, a bunch of great stuff, all coming up in this episode of Habs Digest. Quick, before we get into the video though, we are less than 100 subs away from 21,000. It's a huge goal. Thank you so much for being here, and just double check that you haven't hit that button, because we're here every single day with Habs content. Jesse, let's start with some draft stuff. Now, there's been a lot of draft talk, and having 16 and 17, look, we might trade some of these picks, we might pick at them, but we have to take a look at all the guys available. And the Athletics' recent mock draft, they have Carter Bear. And Scott Wheeler simply says, look, teams can get too cute. I won't. He's the best player available on my board. His Achilles rehab, yes, he lacerated his Achilles. It's a big worry, but he's young. You know, he's an excellent up and down the lineup winger. And Jesse, we'll get into some of the details in a second here, but just on the surface, like, again, 6 feet tall, 180, doesn't mind getting physical, 18 years old, 40 goals in 56 games in the dub. I actually quite like the idea of this kind of player for the Montreal Canadiens.
And so do the Montreal Canadiens brass. In fact, they've actually met with Carter Bear earlier this year, going out to dinner, getting to know the player. So where there's smoke, there's fire. Definitely somebody they're interested in. And besides that, Josh, like, we're seeing a lot of buzz online for this player. And again, that's always a strong indicator when people, different media sources just kind of bring him up a lot. We're seeing that hype, that buzz there, even though having like a very tough Achilles injury right before the WHL playoffs for him. But you know what? That hype is still continuing. All that momentum that he really kind of, got going during this season is really continuing now by Josh. Like, you got to love that he's playing like a complete game. He plays with that heart. He has that goal scoring of being able to score 40 goals. But again, that attention to detail where he plays physically, 200-foot game, getting those comparisons to Matthew Tkachuk. Like, Josh, I love going over these prospects because there is some serious players that we're looking at that are going to be major contributors in the NHL. Like, we just have to look at Cole Caufield now, obviously on our first line, one of our star young players. He was picked at 15th overall. This is a guy who scored 37 goals last year for the Montreal Canadiens, is nowhere near his ceiling. So we very much need to get used to the idea, as Kent Hughes is, that we can be adding a huge impact player to this team if we're able to make the right selection.
Absolutely. And again, Carter Bear, like, Jesse, if he doesn't have that injury and he goes out and has a monster playoffs, we could be talking about this guy being a top 10 pick. And just to highlight some of the things you mentioned and what people are saying about him, like, this is from the Hockey Writers. I'll link this down below so you can have a more detailed look, but more than comfortable engaging physically. Creates a decent chunk of his offense through initiating contact. He keeps possessions alive. His instincts stand out. His puck battle initiations are really good. He locates the right places on the ice to become a scoring threat, but it's not just that. You said the two-way game as well. He likes to be involved defensively. It's an area where his instincts shine. He closes scoring lanes before they even open. And with Bear, you're getting a decent package. He's got that blend of skill, hockey IQ, aggressiveness. He's a bit of everything. And again, Jesse, like you said, these picks at 16 and 17, like, yes, I know we're ready to trade them. And I know, like, statistically, someone drafted in the top 10 has a lot higher likelihood of being a big impact player in the league. But Montreal, especially now, Jesse, we have a better development program than ever. And a guy like Bear, I actually think if he's available, like, not many better fits for this team around, but we'd love to hear what you guys have to say down below. Some very big upside there. But look, we got to save the main story for this video, Jesse. For this Frank Seravalli stuff, oh my goodness. Like, I got some Marchessault stuff here, but here's the tweet. First from NHL Rumor Report. I'll get into what Frank said in a second. John Marchessault open to the idea of being traded this offseason. Montreal would be a favorable landing spot. Well, let's dive into exactly what Frank had to say. He said, I think in a perfect world, he would love to go to the Montreal Canadiens and go home. Again, this is on the heels of him also saying that Nashville could very well trade Jonathan Marchessault, even saying that it might be at a reduced cap. We'll dive into that in a second. He said, I don't know how open the Habs are, but given the term of his deal, but you can see him being a pretty good, bringing some pretty good offense to a team that's already pretty good offensively and take that next step. He seems like a true Marty St. Louis type player, doesn't he? And yeah, Jesse, I mean, he kind of does. I mean, we've talked about Marchessault a lot. We know Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton, they went out and tried to get him on a 4-year deal last year. If he's available on a 4-year deal this year, even at a reduced cap hit, I'm starting to think this could make a ton of sense for Montreal.
Well, he was a player that identified even last year that Kent Hughes would be interested in free agency. We then find out later on the summer, in fact, that they did talk. And it was really just the term was the difference. A 3-year deal was on the table from the Montreal Canadiens. He ended up signing a 5 over with the Predators. But with a year kind of burned off that contract for right now, I think Kirby Dach being injured here, knowing what Kent Hughes knows about Kirby Dach, I think even though that Marchessault isn't a center, this is a player he still is interested in. This is definitely before we're getting out of Laine. I think we're bringing in a Patrik Laine, knowing we're missing out on a Marchessault, looking to get that scoring winger. But again, the one issue is definitely just playing right wing instead of a center and kind of the term on the deal. So those are kind of the only cons to this deal. For me, it's all positive other than that. I definitely want to get that 2C first before kind of looking to get that right wing. But at the same time, we can't overlook the fact that this guy is a Stanley Cup winner, Conn Smythe Trophy winner. This guy produces in the playoffs. He's a proven point producer, so consistent over his career, not only of staying in the lineup, playing well. You could maybe put the size as being one of those other little knocks, 5'9", 185. If you're able maybe to get a bigger center with him to play along with Demidov that can play that physical, that's maybe that ideal sort of fit. We know we already have Patrik Laine though, and that's I think what kind of muddies the water in all this. If we don't have a Patrik Laine, even though we need a 2C, we know we have another spot in the top 6, and that kind of seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I feel like Kent Hughes, he's going to want again to see what's going on with Patrik Laine. Even though some fans have completely written him off just because of kind of the playoff performance, I think Kent Hughes is still going to be smart to see what's going on with that situation before completely casting him aside. That being said, it's like he showed a lot of interest in Montreal as a player. The Preds are looking to get a little bit younger. So I know we need the 2C, but, very interesting player all the same.
A big question would be the cost, right? And, I don't know what Montreal would want to give up for Jonathan Marchessault, because, again, like you said, for all the reasons that we'd want to bring him here, winner, 25 points, 22 games, winning that Stanley Cup. I mean, no one's going to forget that postseason, especially for Marchessault, scoring 42 goals on Vegas just last year. Nashville was a dysfunctional mess this year. Sorry, Predators fans, if you're watching, but, that is the case, and he still put up 56 points with 21 goals. In the right situation, you know that he's a guy that can put up 25 to 30. He's done it for a while. Yes, he is getting older. He's 34 and he's 5'9", and I totally understand that he doesn't play center. However, especially if you can get him at a reduced cap hit, maybe they retain 25% for the whole deal, you're getting him at just over $4 million. Jesse, if they retain 50% of the deal, which I really don't think they would do, but you never really know, we're talking, they might, right? And if you retain 50% of the deal, you're knocking this down to a sub $3 million deal for 4 years for a guy like Marchessault who can bring that production. My question is, if he was a free agent and you had the option to get him between $3 and $4 million, depending on retention for 4 years, to me, that's something the Habs management would absolutely do. It's something we tried to do. Get a guy, not a too big of a commitment. Jesse, I think we're at the point now, we've talked about this. Is he the absolute, undeniable perfect fit? No. But at the cap hit, it's hard to deny that he would be a good fit. And I think we've been saying this a lot. There comes a point where Montreal got to start getting these proven vets who we know, like we said, we know the history of production. We are sure of what they're going to bring this team. And I think he fits the bill maybe more than some other guys. I agree that a 2C would be nice. And I agree again, maybe we don't want to give up too much for this guy, especially if they retain. It might cost some decent draft capital, maybe even talking both of our first round picks. But at the same time, sooner or later, you got to make a move for these proven winners. And I think that Marchessault does fit that bill as much as maybe physically he doesn't.
Yeah, having a vet and somebody who knows how to win in the playoffs. Josh, we almost feel like whoever Kent does bring in for this team in the top 6, whether that's a center or the right wing, preferably the center there, is that he's going to want to bring in a guy who's had success in the playoffs. We know Kent Hughes. We're going to say, we were looking for a guy that had experience winning in the playoffs. Why does that matter? Because the Habs are a young team getting into the playoffs, and they need those vet guys of once they get in there to really know what to do with that situation. That being said, Josh, it's even though there's so much things to like, it's really not a slam dunk just because of the future of the organization, where if Marchessault comes in, you're bumping Laine now onto that third line, and that's where we start getting in the territory of blocking some of those younger players, which they're ready to take the next step, a Kaiden, a Beck, the NHL level. It's just once our third line starts getting pretty deep like that, obviously you're not making that way for those younger players. That being said, that's a fluid situation in terms of what we're offering up for prospects for our 2C going forward. It could look really different. I'm still happy we got Patrik Laine.
Yeah.
I'm not saying just swap him out with Marchessault, even though obviously like Marchessault has a lot of a proven track record of performing when it does matter. Going to be very interesting to kind of balance this out. Interesting to see how Kent Hughes will kind of revisit this whole situation.
Working these timelines is a tough thing, right? Because you bring in Marshall, so again, like you said, that's 4 years, but you only have this 1 year left guaranteed for Laine, then you got to fill that void, right? So it's like these spots are going to be there, and honestly, like, I don't know, maybe this is a hot take, but Marshall's production, even now at the age of 34, probably 34 through 36, it's probably going to be better than most, if not all, of our young prospects that aren't on the team in terms of offensive impact, right? So maybe that's a hot take, but like, again, most players never reach Jonathan Marchessault level of production. And so anyway, there's different aspects to everything, but we'd love to hear what you guys have to say down below, because this is, we were talking about Marchessault a bit. This is a pretty big one today, so we'd love to hear your thoughts, but that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.